the 5th of June, 2022. This is going to be a short update briefing on Tropical Storm Alex, which is coming our way tomorrow. They just have the first slide, please. What you can see on the first slide here is, yes, thank you, is the circulation of Tropical Storm Alex just to our west. You see Bermuda highlighted there and the yellow X, and this is right up to date. This is right as of 9 p.m. this evening. If we could just go to the next slide, please. What we've got is Alex is about 330 miles west of Bermuda right now. It's moving northeast at 23 knots, so it picked up a little bit of speed, and it's got maximum sustained winds of 55 knots or 65 miles an hour. So it's a little bit more intense than it was earlier in the day. Forecast closest point of approach to Bermuda is going to be within 67 nautical miles to the north-northwest, and that's at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Monday, the 6th of June. We do have a tropical storm warning in effect, and one thing I'd like to direct all the viewers' attention to is the outlines in blue and also in yellow around the center of the center position of the storm highlighted there. Now, the blue is the radius of 34 knot or tropical storm force winds. The yellow is the radius of 50 knot winds, which is strong tropical storm force. And as you can see, it's got Alex has got this shape where you have a wide expanse of tropical storm force winds and the smaller, tighter core of stronger winds, 50 knot winds, and that looks like it's going to go right over the island. Even though the main part of the storm is weakening over time, by the time we get to Monday afternoon, it should have weakened right out as it passes by us. But it does look like we're going to see some brief periods of up to 50 knot winds over the island tomorrow late morning, mid to late morning. So if you just have a next look at the next slide, we get some idea of some of those wind timings. So what this is going to do locally is give us an onset of tropical storm force winds sometime in the early morning hours pre-dawn of tomorrow morning. And winds starting up out of the south, 34 knots plus, ramping up gradually all the way up to 50 knots when Alex makes the closest point of approach sometime around 9 or 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. And at that stage, we should probably see the worst effects of Alex with winds just about reaching 50 knots over the island and sort of veering right round to the west before dropping out again in the late morning and afternoon. So this is a slightly more intense, not a great deal more intense, but a slightly more intense forecast than we saw earlier on today. Alex did intensify a little bit stronger than previously anticipated, and there were Hurricane Hunter aircraft flying through the storm, taking measurements, and found some stronger conditions. Unfortunately, this is tropical cyclones, hurricanes, and tropical storms can be fairly uncertain, and so you do expect to see some uncertainty in these forecasts from time to time. But it only means that the storm is only going to be a few more knots higher than it was forecast to be before, but that actually pushes us into the threshold of some impacts, and we wanted to take account of that. So if I could just have the final slide there with some key take-home points from us in the looking at the impacts of the weather. So Tropical Storm Alex is weakening as it passes north of the island. That's an important thing to note. There are no hurricane force winds expected with this particular system, no hurricane force sustained winds, I should say. There's very high confidence in the track. It is going to go north of us. All the models are aligned in that, but a little bit less certainty when it comes to how big the storm is and how intense it is. The event in general will be very much like very rapid onset conditions of a winter gale. So if you think about a winter gale, it takes a long time to ramp up. In this case, it'll ramp up in very short order in the wee hours of tomorrow morning. Through Monday, late morning, and even into early afternoon, mariners, motorists, the public should generally be ready for tropical storm force winds, hazardous surf, very rough seas offshore. We're talking about wave heights up to about 20 feet. And during the late morning, some short periods of sustained winds up to just about 50 knots. And that certainly may be felt in the most exposed areas, with some stronger gusts in and around showers and thunderstorms. And you can see an image here of what that might look like based on a past event that we've had here in Bermuda. So really, that's it from me here at the Bermuda Weather Service, the Bermuda Airport Authority. Thanks very much. I'll pass it back to the minister and say thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that update. Good evening, Bermuda. As the Minister of National Security, my admonition is to err on the side of caution. So based on the Bermuda Weather Service's data, schools have been closed for the day tomorrow. Buses will not be running for the morning, and ferries also will be halted until after lunch. Government offices will be closed until 1 p.m. Storms, as we know, are unpredictable, and we must also look out for our most vulnerable. So schools will not have to worry about trying to close in the midst of bad weather, etc. And our children will be safe and not have to be out in these elements, which, as I said, are very unpredictable. So the decision has been made, and updates will be given as we see fit. The causeway remains open, but it will be monitored. It will be monitored throughout the day. So as a result, our airport remains open, although a few of our morning flights have been canceled. So I'd like to remind everyone to look out for your neighbor. Do what you can to make all of us safe. So stay safe, Bermuda. And now I'll hand it over to Mr. Cushion. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I've been asked to say a few words on the rationale behind the decisions that the EMO have taken. A lot of decisions that we make are guided by public transportation. If public transportation is not running, then people can't get to school or can't get to work or home from school or home from work. The buses have a threshold of 48 knots, after which they do not run on the roads. They're subjected to the impacts of winds on the flat sides and high sides of the vehicles. So earlier on, the forecast was for this storm to give us 48 knot winds. And as everybody wants everything to stay open, we were seeing how we can make that happen. But the later forecasts have pushed this a bit higher, and now we're into 50 knots or the low 50s. And bear in mind, this is only a forecast. It's not exactly we're going to get 50 knots. We may get a few knots higher, and we may get a few knots lower. So we have to make a decision on the data that we have right now. The decision has to be made and communicated to the public at the very least 12 hours before school starts and businesses start opening the next day. Any later decision, then people turn around and say, I've already left the home, or arrangements have already been made. So based on the data that we have, we're going to see impacts of 50 knot winds, which means the buses are not safe to be driven on the roads. It's not safe for the drivers or the passengers. And we don't want to have a lot of damage on the bus fleet, and the ferries won't be running. So if public transportation isn't running, it means that school children won't be in schools. It means that people will have to stay at home to look after their children. And it means government offices will be impacted, and so will private businesses. And so the head of the public service has made that decision that government offices will be closed and not open until 1 p.m. tomorrow. Due to the nature of weather, it's a forecast and not an exact science. So as the minister said, we will be monitoring the causeway, because if the storm should increase in intensity, it is not predicted to do so, but it could happen, then we have plans that we can close the causeway should it be needed. We're lucky tomorrow because at 10 a.m. on 12 noon, when the height of the storm is, we are not at high tide. High tide's at 2:30 p.m. And the danger, or the most danger in the storm, is the water, and the wind drives the water. So the causeway will not be impacted at the height of the winds. We don't close other bridges like Watford Bridge, which is elevated and subjected to winds. And so it is the water driving the wind, which is the most danger to people. So we would advise people not to be on the roads tomorrow. People on bikes shouldn't be on roads. People in high-sided vehicles that are impacted by the wind shouldn't be on the roads. And even motor cars should think twice before being on the roads. And I'll hand it back now to you, Minister.
So Steve, I really appreciate that in-depth report. I don't have anything else to add. I don't know about you, Mark. And if you don't, then
I have nothing to add. Thank you very much, Minister.
okay, so I would like to say again, stay safe, Bermuda, and look out for your neighbor. Thank you.